Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. It's February 19th, and on this day in 1970, Denny McLain was suspended from Major League Baseball. Denny McLain was a great pitcher. He was a two-time Cy Young Award winner. The first time he won it was in 1968 after he compiled a 31-6 record with an ERA of 1.96. He won the AL MVP that year as well. He was the first pitcher in 34 years to win 30 games, and he's the last man to ever do it. He followed up that season, known as the Year of the Pitcher, with an impressive 24-9 record with a 2.8 ERA and another Cy Young, albeit shared with Baltimore's Mike Cuellar. But Denny McLain was also plagued with a lot of problems. Now, here on this date, just a few months after winning his second consecutive Cy Young, McLain found himself in Bowie Kuhn's office surrounded by his lawyers. A few weeks earlier, there was word going around Detroit that circulated back to the commissioner's office about a grand jury looking into McLain's involvement with gambling. A Sports Illustrated article appeared in the February 17th edition that painted a picture of McLain's involvement with a bookmaking operation, failing to pay more than $46,000 on a winning bet during the 1967 season. Detroit Mafia enforcer Tony Giacalone supposedly stomped on McLain's foot, dislocating a few toes. McLain missed the last 2 weeks of September, which raised several eyebrows considering that McLain's Detroit Tigers were in a tight pennant race with the Boston Red Sox. To try to recoup some of the mob's losses, Giacalone's brother Billy apparently bet big on Boston to win the pennant, and bet against Detroit with McLain on the mound in the final game of the year. McLain lost that game, as well as his previous two. Sitting in Kuhn's office, McLain admitted to investing $5,700 in the bookmaking firm run through a bar he spent a lot of time at in Flint. Despite not having definitive proof that McLain bet on baseball games, Denny's own admission, the grand jury inquiry, and the Sports Illustrated article forced his hand, and he suspended McLain indefinitely. The grand jury never indicted him, but a dark cloud hung over him for the rest of his life. He was reinstated and returned to baseball in July. However, things didn't stabilize for him. He was suspended twice more during that season for escalating and alarming behavior. He threatened a parking attendant, he dumped a bucket of ice water over two sports writers' heads, and then he waved a gun around in a Chicago restaurant and later violated federal law after he carried a gun on a commercial plane. The troubles weighed on him, and there were those who noticed he lost some zip on his fastball. In his truncated 1970 season, he pitched in 14 games, winning just 3, and he had an ERA of 4.65. He filed for bankruptcy after the season, even though he was Detroit's first $100,000 a year ball player just 2 years earlier. Also, the Tigers traded him to Washington. Now playing for new manager Ted Williams, the two did not get along, and the Senators were the worst team in the league. In 1971, he led the league with 22 losses. In 72, he bounced around the league, going to Oakland and then Atlanta, but he was not even close to the pitcher that he had been just 3 years prior. His baseball career was over, but his problems were not. In 1985, he was found guilty of racketeering, gambling, and cocaine use and sentenced to 23 years, but got out 2 years later due to procedural issues. He was indicted and convicted of stealing more than $12 million from his company's pension fund and sentenced to 8 years, serving 6 of those. While McLain's problems didn't start on this day, they did come to light with Kuhn's suspension of him on this day in 1970. Also on this day in 1984, brothers Phil and Steve Mahre won Olympic gold and silver in the slalom in Sarajevo, becoming the first brothers to win Olympic medals in the same event. Phil's gold was just the second gold medal won by an American man in an alpine skiing event at that point. Also, happy 38th birthday to Marta. Born on this day in 1986, Marta is considered to be the greatest women's soccer player of all time. Her 17 World Cup goals playing for Brazil are the most scored by any person, man or a woman, in World Cup history. She holds the distinction of being the first person to score a goal at 5 World Cups, as well as score a goal in 5 Olympic Games. And in 2013, South African sprinter Oscar Pistorius appeared in front of a South African magistrate, claiming he did not intend to kill his girlfriend 5 days earlier, but rather believed he was shooting an intruder. He was found guilty later that year, and after a series of legal battles and appeals, he was released from prison in January of this year. That's all for today. More tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.